The moment I walked into my director's office and saw the man from the Tim Hortons sitting behind the conference table still wearing that same worn flannel jacket, except now with a Health Canada lanyard around his neck and a name badge that made my stomach drop, I genuinely thought I had the wrong room. He looked up at me the same way he had 3 weeks earlier. Calm, unhurried, like he had all the time in the world, and none of it was being wasted. My director, Sandra, was standing off to the side. She gave me a look I couldn't read. "Close the door behind you," she said. I did. I had been working at the Regional Public Health Office in Ottawa for just over 2 years at that point. I was a junior health program coordinator, the kind of role where you spend a lot of time making sure other people's work gets where it needs to go, and very little time getting credit for any of it. I didn't mind that most days. I genuinely believed in the work. Maternal and child health programs, community outreach in lower-income neighborhoods, translation support for newcomer families. It mattered, even when it felt like nobody above me noticed whether I showed up or not. My direct supervisor at the time was a man named Derek Holloway. He had been with the department for 11 years, which he mentioned in almost every meeting, and he had a particular talent for making junior staff feel like inconveniences he was obligated to manage. He wasn't the kind of supervisor who yelled. He was the kind who sent emails at 11 p.m. asking why a report wasn't formatted to his preference, then CC'd the director. The kind who gave you feedback in front of the whole team and framed cruelty as mentorship. The kind who, when you stayed late to fix something, never acknowledged it, but when something went wrong, made sure your name was attached to it. I had learned to keep my head down around Derek. I documented everything. I kept records of his instructions in writing whenever I could. I had watched 2 other coordinators transfer out of our unit in 18 months, and I understood why. None of that was on my mind the morning I stopped at the Tim Hortons on Rideau Street before work. It was a Tuesday in early March. Cold the way Ottawa gets in March, where the calendar says spring is coming but the city hasn't gotten the message yet. I had left home a bit early because I wanted to sit down for a few minutes before the day started. I ordered a medium double-double and a toasted bagel with cream cheese, found a seat near the window, and tried to mentally prepare for a 9 a.m. meeting I was already dreading. That's when I noticed him. He was an older man, maybe mid-70s, sitting at the counter near the front. He had a coffee in front of him and a small paper bag that I guessed held a muffin or a sandwich. He was wearing a flannel jacket over a collared shirt, and there was a slight tremor in his hands, not severe, just the kind you notice and then feel guilty for noticing. He looked like someone's grandfather. He looked like he came here often. The young woman at the till was apologetic, but firm. "I'm sorry, sir," its saying declined. "Do you have another card?" He patted his jacket pockets, then his pants pockets. He shook his head slightly, a small, contained gesture, the kind that comes from a lifetime of not making a fuss. "I must have left my wallet at home," he said. "I'm sorry. How much is it?" I said. I hadn't planned to say anything. I was already halfway through my bagel and I almost didn't. Both of them looked at me. $11.40, the woman at the till said. I was already up, card in hand. "Please," the man said. "You don't have to." "It's fine," I said. Honestly. I tapped my card and handed him the paper bag, which the woman had set on the counter. "Have a good morning." I went back to my seat. He looked over at me once and nodded, a quiet acknowledgement. I nodded back. I finished my bagel, gathered my things, and walked to work. I didn't think much more about it. It was $11. The city had given me enough mornings where a stranger's small kindness had made a difference. It seemed right to pass it along when I could. The 9 a.m. meeting was everything I'd expected. Derek had called it to review the Q1 progress reports from the community outreach coordinators, which meant sitting around a table while he went through each document line by line and made comments that ranged from mildly unhelpful to quietly humiliating. When he got to mine, he spent 4 minutes discussing a formatting inconsistency that I was fairly certain he had introduced himself by sending me a revised template 2 days before the deadline. A template that contradicted the one he'd given me the month before. "This makes the whole section hard to follow," he said, in the tone of someone explaining something obvious to someone slow. "When we present this to the regional director, it reflects on the entire unit." I said I understood, and that I would revise it. "You should have caught this before submitting," he said. I said I would make sure it didn't happen again. Across the table, my colleague Priya caught my eye for just a moment. She said nothing, but the look said enough. That was March. By April, things with Derek had gotten measurably worse. It started with the Newcomer Family Resource Initiative, a program I had been coordinating for 8 months, the one I was most invested in, the one I had spent evenings and weekends building relationships for, learning enough phrases in Somali and Tigrinya to make the families we worked with feel less like files and more like people. Derek had been largely uninvolved in the day-to-day of it, which was fine by me. He had bigger priorities, he said. Regional strategy, stakeholder alignment. In April, the program was flagged for a federal funding review. It was routine, these reviews happened every 2 years, and our numbers were strong, but Derek decided, apparently, that this was an opportunity. He began inserting himself into the program file. He requested documents I had already submitted to him months earlier. He scheduled meetings with our community partners without telling me, then summarized those meetings in emails that made it sound as though he had been managing the program all along. When I raised this with him professionally, in writing, as I had learned to do, he replied that he was simply ensuring appropriate oversight and suggested I focus on my deliverables. I went home that night and sat at my kitchen table for a long time. I wasn't sure what to do. I had no proof of anything that crossed a clear line. What he was doing was slippery and deliberate, the kind of thing that looks unremarkable in any single email, but adds up to something unmistakable over months. I was 28. He had been at the department for 11 years. I thought about the 2 coordinators who had left before me, and I wondered if they had sat at their own kitchen tables having this same conversation with themselves. I did what I always did. I documented. I kept going. I told myself that the work was what mattered, that the families in the program were counting on someone showing up, and that showing up was what I could control. 3 weeks after the Tim Hortons morning, Sandra's assistant sent me a meeting request. Sandra Beaumont was our regional director. She was meticulous, even-keeled, the kind of leader who chose her words carefully and meant all of them. In 2 years, I had been in a room with her maybe 4 times, all of them large team meetings. A direct meeting request from her office was not something that happened to junior coordinators without a reason. I spent the rest of that afternoon quietly going over everything I had documented, wondering if somehow I was the one being reviewed. The next morning, I knocked on Sandra's office door at 9 a.m. "Come in," she said. "Close the door." That's when I saw him. The man from the Tim Hortons, flannel jacket gone, replaced by a suit that fit the way suits fit people who have worn them for decades. A Health Canada lanyard. A name badge that read, in plain black text, Dr. Gerald Whitfield, Deputy Minister, Public Health Branch. I genuinely thought I had the wrong room. He looked at me the same way he had at the counter. Calm. Patient. No performance in it. Sandra was standing to the side. Her expression was unreadable. "Sit down, please," she said. I sat. "Doctor." Whitfield spoke first. His voice was the same as it had been at the counter, measured, unhurried, slightly gravelly. "I believe we've met," he said. "Yes," I managed. Yes. "You paid for my coffee," he said. "And my muffin. And you didn't wait for me to thank you." I didn't know what to say to that, so I didn't say anything. He nodded slowly, as if that confirmed something. "I was doing a quiet site visit," he said. "I do them a few times a year without notice. I like to see how regional offices operate when they're not expecting anyone from Ottawa." He glanced briefly at Sandra, then back at me. "I'd been sitting in that Tim Hortons for 20 minutes before you came in. I left my transit card in my other coat, as it turns out. Not my wallet, just the card I use for small purchases. I was testing whether I could manage." He smiled slightly. "I could not." He paused. "I want to ask you something," he said. "When you paid for my coffee, did you know who I was?" "No," I said. "I had no idea. Did you think you might get something out of it?" I almost laughed. "You were a stranger who needed $11, I said. "That was all I saw." He was quiet for a moment. "That's what I thought," he said. Sandra set a folder on the table in front of me. I recognized the tab on it. It was the Newcomer Family Resource Initiative file. "Dr. Whitfield sat in on a stakeholder briefing yesterday afternoon," Sandra said. "One of our community partners, the Somali Women's Resource Collective, specifically asked to speak to whoever built the intake process for the program. They said it was the first government process they had encountered where the forms were available in Somali, and the follow-up calls came from someone who'd taken the time to learn a few words of greeting." She paused. "I looked into who built that process." I didn't say anything. "Your name was not on any of the program materials Derek submitted to the Federal Review Committee," she said. "His name was..." The room was very quiet. I've been in this department for 19 years, Sandra said. I know what appropriation looks like. She opened the folder. I also found the email chain. The one where he sent you a revised template 2 days before your deadline and then criticized your report for not matching the original. I had saved every one of those emails. I had just never sent them to anyone. How long has this been going on? She asked. I thought about the 2 coordinators who had left. I thought about the kitchen table, the evening spent documenting, the careful measured language I had trained myself to use when responding to his emails, so there was nothing he could point to. About 18 months, I said. Sandra nodded once. She looked at Dr. Whitfield. Something passed between them that I wasn't entirely part of. Derek Holloway has been placed on administrative leave pending a formal review, she said. Effective this morning. I sat with that for a moment. The funding review for the newcomer initiative, Dr. Whitfield said, has been escalated to a priority file. I've asked that the program coordinator of record be corrected before anything goes to committee. He looked at me directly. That will be your name. I didn't know what to do with my hands. I put them flat on the table. I want to be clear, he said, that none of this is happening because of a cup of coffee. What you did at that counter was a small thing, a decent thing. But small, decent things don't get people promoted or protected, they just tell you something about a person's character. He leaned forward slightly. What's getting you this recognition is 18 months of doing your job carefully and honestly while someone above you tried to make it invisible. That's what we're correcting. I nodded. I wasn't sure I trusted my voice. Sandra slid a second document across the table. There's also a reclassification proposal. Given the scope of what you've been managing effectively as a lead coordinator without the title or compensation, HR is reviewing a move from AS03 to AS04. She said it the way you say something factual and uncomplicated. You'll hear within 2 weeks. I walked out of that office and stood in the hallway for a long moment. Priya was at her desk when I came back to the unit. She looked up, and something in my face must have told her that the meeting had not gone the way either of us had feared. You okay? She said. Yeah, I said. I sat down. I think so. I didn't tell her everything right away. I just opened my email, found the thread for the Newcomer Family Resource Initiative, and started drafting the progress update that was due to the federal committee by the end of the week. I put my name at the top, in the coordinator field, the way it had always belonged. The Tim Hortons on Rideau Street is still there. I still stop in some mornings, when the weather is bad enough that I want something warm before the walk from the bus stop. I always order the same thing, medium double, toasted bagel with cream cheese. I still sometimes sit by the window and watch the street for a few minutes before the day starts. I never saw Dr. Whitfield there again. I don't imagine a deputy minister keeps a regular Tuesday morning routine at a Rideau Street coffee shop. But once, about a month after that meeting in Sandra's office, I got a short email from his assistant. It said that Dr. Whitfield wanted to pass along his thanks, and that the community partners had formally commended the Newcomer Family Resource Initiative in their federal submission. It ended with one line that I've thought about more than I probably should. He said to tell you that the coffee was excellent, and he hopes you're still paying it forward. I had a meeting in 10 minutes. I typed back a quick reply, just a thank you, just a few lines. Then I closed my laptop, picked up my mug, and walked down the hall. The work was the same as it had always been. The families were the same. The forms still needed to be filed, the follow-up calls still needed to be made, the relationships still needed tending. None of that had changed. But something else had, and I think the only word for it is this. I stopped bracing for the day when doing the right thing carefully and quietly would be held against me. I stopped waiting for the floor to give out. If you've ever worked somewhere that made you feel like your effort was invisible, like the more carefully you did your job, the more it disappeared into someone else's portfolio, I want you to hear this. It doesn't always stay invisible. Sometimes the person who sees it is the last person you expected to be watching. And sometimes it starts with a cup of coffee you didn't think twice about buying. Stay with me. There's more coming.